Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's September 5th. We have to talk about this insane story inside the DOJ that broke late yesterday and resulted in, honestly, the strangest social media post that I have ever seen from a government agency in my entire long life. This story is one for the ages, but it's not the only incredibly crazy and damning story, unfortunately, that we've got to talk about this morning, because this morning, the New York Times broke a story about a SEAL Team 6 mission under the instruction of Donald Trump that went wildly off the rails. And it's really disturbing, actually. So we have a lot more to talk about today than that. RFK Jr., the jobs numbers, all sorts of other things. But in any event, we've got a lot to cover. Okay, today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a tan button-down sweater. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I am coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. So the honeypot story is one for the ages. So here's how it went down. A senior DOJ official by the name of Joseph Schnitt, who is the deputy chief of enforcement operations. This is not a low-level job. I have to say this right away, because some of the media coverage of this has indicated that he's a mid to low-level staffer, and that's how they're trying to kind of tamp down on the absolute scandal of this. This one, Mr. Joseph Schnitt, went on Hinge, and like anybody is allowed to do, decided he was going to date in Washington, D.C., okay? He happened to meet someone on Hinge who, it turns out, was something of an undercover agent for a far right-wing influencer by the name of James O'Keefe. And this is someone who sort of specializes, I haven't followed him, but he sort of specializes in gotcha videos from what I can tell. Apparently he set up this undercover operative, this young woman who Joseph Schnitt, now here's a little alarm bell for you, thought was an au pair in Washington, D.C., on 2 dates through Hinge. And on the second date, unbeknownst to him, she ran video on her phone. And on that video, Schnitt is heard saying that the Epstein files will be redacted to remove every Republican name that appears in them, leaving only liberals and Democrats who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking to be known to the public. Now, there's a few things about this that are very interesting. The first is that the setup was by a far right-wing influencer. Now, I've been saying here for quite some time that the base of Trump's support has been radically undermined by the failure to release the Epstein files. This is yet another example of this. This guy was not set up by some left-leaning media organization. He was not set up by some undercover reporter from a mainstream news organization. No. A far right-wing influencer ran a honeypot scheme on him to get information about the cover-up of the Epstein files. So that in and of itself is something really worth noting. But then we had another development late last night. I can't. I'm having one of those days, you guys, where I can't believe how dumb all these people are. I mean, I know this is no shocker. We're going to talk about RFK Jr. Speaking of that, but nonetheless, I have never seen anything like this. I have to tell you guys, I went to law school in Washington, D.C. I knew people who worked inside the DOJ. I knew people who were inside the DOJ Civil and Civil Rights Division. It was considered such a prestigious place to work. People were desperate to get into the DOJ Summer Honors Program from my law school, right? It was so competitive. Okay. Last night, the official DOJ Twitter account published images that were clearly written on someone's cell phone notes app, presumably Joseph Schnitt's, And they didn't even bother to crop out the time or the percentage of charge on the cell phone that claimed that Schnitt had no idea that the person he was dating was a reporter, which she wasn't. She was an undercover operative, had no idea that, she was recording anything that they said, and that everything that he said about the Epstein investigation was stuff he only knew from the media. Okay, that's patently false. There has been no media reporting that the DOJ was planning to redact files and only include liberal and Democratic names in the public release. So the thing that was the craziest to me about this, though, is that the DOJ official account publishing a screenshot off someone's notes app, rather than dealing with this through like a public press announcement or undertaking some form of disciplinary action that then would result in a press release or holding a press conference to discuss the allegations here. No, they did like the equivalent of the average influencer being caught using a slur online. And it wasn't even an apology. It was just like a notes app explanation that literally made no sense and didn't line up with the facts as we knew them. It's crazy. It's crazy. So what do we take away from this? Well, I think we can take away from this a couple of things. Senior DOJ officials, like many of the people in this government, have no regard for national security or confidential or classified information. Senior people inside the DOJ clearly know there's an ongoing cover-up underway and that there are plans for it. And the kind of non-denial denial of this, let alone the lack of disciplinary action against this particular attorney, tells us that they're just fine with what happened. And that in and of itself is just stunning. On top of that, yesterday, and this, weaves into this whole story in a kind of very bizarre way. We talked yesterday about how Thomas Massie, Freedom Caucus member, Republican GOP House member, has been leading the charge to get legislation passed to release all the Epstein files. Yesterday, he gave an interview on CNN where he said that billionaire Trump donor John Paulson is in the Epstein files. And again, this in and of itself is a massive revelation because it runs contrary to all of the denials that there's names or there's a list or that there's, Epstein files don't exist, right? But in addition to that, we know that there is a huge motivation for them to cover up things like this, because if folks get arrested or sued, like assuming statutes of limitations haven't expired, that's going to cut off the donor money that they're getting through back-end channels, okay? So all of this put together makes it very clear like what their intent is, what their motive is. And I will just say, arguably, given that there are efforts right now, including subpoenas that have gone to the DOJ for this information, for, the Epstein files themselves, thanks to like some maneuvering in some of these committees, you could make an argument that this rises to the level of obstruction of justice and obstruction of Congress, just simply because they are hiding this information from the general public. So this is crazy. John Paulson, not John Bolton, John Paulson. You guys are funny. John Paulson, billionaire donor to far right-wing causes, including huge donor to the Trump campaign. Okay, let's talk for a second about this story that was broken this morning in the New York Times. This one's really disturbing, you guys. I have to kind of warn you. Okay, so this morning in the New York Times, a story broke about a SEAL Team 6 raid that was ordered by Donald Trump back in 2019. Now, you may be asking yourself why it is that this story is breaking now. So stay tuned, because I have some thoughts on that. Here's what happened. Back in 2019, when Trump was president, he wanted to get a listening device into North Korea at the time that he was engaged in nuclear talks with Kim Jong-un, okay? No way to do that except with a secret mission with no drones overhead and using satellite imagery from space, except using SEAL Team 6. And so they plotted this scheme to come onto land through the ocean using single-person submarines and SEAL Team 6 to plant this listening device at a very precarious place off the coast of North Korea. But here's what happened. They showed up in the middle of the night. SEAL Team 6 comes onto the beach, and there's a fishing boat out there, right? In the middle of the ocean. Not in the middle of the ocean, but like right off the coast. And they've been told that if there's any sign of security forces, to abort the mission, okay? they don't know this fishing boat is a fishing boat. What they see is a boat with flashlights. And the head of SEAL Team 6 made a decision from the beach and opened fire on that boat and murdered everyone on board it. They then swam out to the boat and discovered that there were no military uniforms, that there were no guns, that these were just a few fishermen in the middle of the night fishing for food. And they executed them. Then on top of it, because they didn't want to get caught, they knifed the bodies in the lungs so that the bodies would sink. They sank the bodies off the coast of North Korea and they fled. And literally no one was told about this. There were no immediate reports to Congress. It wasn't until Biden was in office that there was even an investigation, which never became public. And essentially, it appears that North Korea may have known that something was happening because security forces from North Korea did descend on that part of the beach after the shots were fired. But they may not have known any of the details of this until today. So here's how the details of this came out. Several someones, senior to our military, are leaking classified information about this raid to the New York Times right now. And you have to ask yourself why. Like, we're 6 years on from this event, right? Why are senior military officials leaking a story about the execution of civilians on a boat off of North Korea right now? So I'm just going to make two observations here. Just this week, we've had a situation where the U.S. military was ordered to murder a boat full of what we now know to be Venezuelan migrants off the coast of the United States. Really not even that, in international waters, headed for Trinidad. We know that that was an illegal order. Like, we know it. There's no international law, no authorization without provocation that allows the United States to simply bomb people out of the ocean because they think or claim that they might be drug smugglers, let alone we now know that that's not the case, okay? It's wildly illegal under international law to do that. It violates treaties, okay? But the second thing that's very bizarre about this is that we know that the order that was given by Trump here was given by him specifically, okay? The order concerning the SEAL Team 6 team that went into North Korea was so secretive that it required Trump's personal approval. This is what's reported in this New York Times piece. And you have to wonder, if you're a senior military official and you knew about this and you knew that SEAL Team 6 had murdered people and like sunk the bodies and ran away and that Congress was never told about this until years later. Even still, only a very limited number of people in Congress knew about this until the story broke this morning. It has to make you ask, what else is Trump ordering special forces to do right now? What other illegal actions is he instructing them to take? What other incidents could he be covering up for the sake of his own benefit? And I just have to say that, this is a sign, actually, contrary to what somebody just dumped in the comments, that Trump does not have the military. Because if you are a senior military official and you are deeply concerned about illegal orders being given by the president of the United States, you would leak a story like this. So it raises huge questions. And I have to say, it's also just beyond upsetting. Like, I read the story, and you should all go read it because it's incredibly well written on top of everything else. But it is really very deeply disturbing how this whole thing went down, and the other thing I'll just point out here is that this could have been considered an act of war against North Korea. Like, murdering North Korean civilians for no reason and with no provocation, that could be considered an act of war. So this in and of itself is really troublesome. And I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg of the story, because who leaked this? We know how this goes with the Trump administration, but what they're going to do next is they're going to be like, who leaked it? And there's going to be a massive investigation to try to find the person who leaked it, not an effort to actually address what happened. But that said, it may chasten some folks in the military who are receiving illegal orders to consider their potential current and future liability for carrying them out. Okay. Let me just answer one other thing here. Of course, there is a doctrine under military law that says you can refuse to carry out an illegal order. But I just need to point something out to everybody here, okay? If you are a special forces trained soldier, that means that you have gone through incredibly rigorous training over many years to carry out the most secret and important missions of the United States military. I think that the idea that we would expect SEAL Team 6 forces who, and by the way, the other thing about this that is reported in the New York Times is this is the exact same team that took out Osama bin Laden. The exact same team, same people. Okay, so the idea that those folks would somehow say, I'm not carrying this out because I think it's illegal, is, I think, a bit much. But I will also say that the illegal actions that were taken here were taken by the leader of the team, right? I mean, again, he stood on a beach and made a decision to open fire on North Korean civilians. That was a decision made in real time, according to the reporting that we have this morning. So, we can talk about U.S. agents going in rogue to a foreign country to plant a listening device. It certainly is not the first time, and it certainly is not the last. But it's the execution of civilians that is at stake here. And so I just want to point something else out. I have a dad who was in the Army at the time of Vietnam, slimly missed it by getting married in time to avoid a cutoff. But nonetheless, trained soldiers in Vietnam on how to survive chemical weapons warfare in bunkers, okay? And anybody who has been in the military in a time of war will tell you that they train essentially the humanity out of you. They train you to kill people. Like, that's what they do. And again, I have to remind people that the military code is very strong. This is one reason why we need great generals in charge of our military who will refuse on behalf of their branches of the military to carry out illegal orders. But it's a lot to ask individual soldiers who have been trained to kill others to reject orders that are given by their superior officers all the way up the chain of command, okay? This brings us, by the way, to Venezuela, because there is some reporting now that the United States is moving military aircraft to Puerto Rico in anticipation of a response from Venezuela for the murder of these migrants on that boat. And of course, many of you know that last night it was announced that Trump's signing an executive order, which he cannot do, like I have to say this, changing the Department of Defense to be named what it was like back in the 40s, the Department of War, all right? He can't change the name of the department, by the way. That takes an act of Congress. So once again, this is an executive order that is meaningless and toothless, but that nonetheless, Secretary Hegseth will probably carry forward nonetheless and change the labels, all right? We can all ask the question of how somebody who wants the Nobel Peace Prize can get it when they've established a Department of War, but that's a conversation for another day. The real question here is what's going to happen next with regard to Venezuela, because it was an illegal act. It could arguably be considered an unprovoked attack against Venezuela in international waters. And we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, it's not good. I can tell you that it's not good. All right. We have to talk about the jobs numbers next. One of the things that we will all remember is that when the jobs numbers came out last month, Trump fired someone from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Today, the jobs numbers were in the toilet. Last month, the United States added just 22,000 new jobs, and the unemployment rate rose to 4.3%, which is higher than it has been since we were still in the lockdown phase of the pandemic in 2021. None of this is good. And I will just remind everybody that, we all know that the tariffs and the mass deportation plans are having an extreme adverse effect on the economy. None of this should come as a surprise. This is one reason, by the way, why Trump is also undertaking this effort to take over the Fed. Yesterday, it was announced that Ed Martin, who is crazy and a Trump acolyte and was the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, has now started an investigation at the behest of the president into Lisa Cook on the Board of Governors, which we discussed last week. So there are efforts everywhere for him to try to cover up exactly what is happening here. That is his own fault. All right. And, we will see what the next steps on this are, but we know he doesn't like the truth and will go to great lengths to cover it up when the truth makes him look bad. Okay. Yesterday, RFK Jr. testified in front of Congress and basically got taken to the woodshed by a number of Republican reps. I only watched as much of it as I could stand. And I will tell you that in addition to the fact that he's belligerent and very clearly a narcissist and also really stupid, he has no grasp of science, no grasp of mRNA technology, and literally couldn't even state how many people had died of COVID to date in the United States. Folks called for his resignation. I'm sorry, this was in the Senate. Raphael Warnock called for his resignation. We had senators on the committee just absolutely taking him to town. And I am wondering, as I wondered last week, given the sheer incompetence of his testimony, how much longer Trump is going to allow this to go on. Because you will remember, I might lose my camera again, you guys. That's not intentional. Hey, if I do, I'll switch to the camera on my laptop. You may remember that last week, Trump made some statements about how vaccines were actually probably pretty good, and he wanted credit for developing the COVID vaccine. The longer this goes on, the worse it makes Trump look, and I would not be surprised to see him kind of like cut bait on this. I warned you guys. I would not be surprised to see him cut bait on this in the event that there is additional fallout from this testimony yesterday. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about today, we had a question from one of our Patreon subscribers. Quick reminder that you can get a Patreon discount between now and a week from today using the code podcast if you head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive. So feel free to do that. If you would like to ask me questions, if you would like to get our weekly bonus broadcasts and the like. All that said, there was a question this morning about kind of handling the pressure of this moment. And I don't want anybody to be under the impression that anyone is dealing with this well, okay? I don't think it's possible for people who are aware of what's happening to be living through fascism in this moment and not have it affect us emotionally, somatically, psychologically, physically even. And I would love to be able to come on here and give you guys all the magic recipe on how to cope. But the answers to this are fairly straightforward. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take breaks. I, this week, have given prescriptions to some of our clients that they need to take breaks. I've had conversations this week with Gen Z activists who are really trying to figure out how to manage all of this on top of looming climate crisis. And the same things are the things that we have been saying over and over again. Those are the things that are necessary right now. You have to take care of your body. You've got to get enough sleep. You've got to not numb it out by over-consuming mind-altering substances, including alcohol. You've got to make sure that you have regular mindfulness practices, that you are finding joy in your day-to-day life, that you are connecting with live human beings who love and care about you, and that you're engaging in productive action to make the world a better place. It's very simple, honestly, as far as a recipe or a prescription. But simultaneously, I just have to tell you, like, we also can't avoid the truth. I have moments where I'm like, I would like to vanish somewhere where I didn't have to think about this for a week. That's not possible, right? This morning, the United Kingdom is passing a bathroom ban for all trans people using the bathroom of their gender identity. We have rising fascism in Germany and France, right? We have poverty and war and conflict in many other parts of the world right now. And then on top of it, we have like climate crisis riding with us 24/7. I just have to say to everybody that, like, if we don't deal with the reality of where we are, we can't actually trounce it. And so we have to adopt the strategies that civil rights organizers have adopted for centuries, frankly, which is that we have to actually consistently stay attuned to the fact that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And marathons, when they're like decades long, this one's almost 10, require us to rest and take care of ourselves and take periodic breaks and stay in community and stay connected and not forget to enjoy ourselves, because joy is an inherent part of what allows us to keep going and survive. So that's my best advice for all of you who are like, how to handle it. And if you need next steps, your next steps right now are to continue to engage in community organizing, to get connected with organizations where you live. Don't forget that we have No Kings 2 coming up on the 18th of October. Please don't forget that mutual aid and connecting with your neighbors and making sure that people in your own community are housed and fed are fundamental acts of resistance. So we need all of that. All right. And I know that this has been a really hard week. I felt it myself. Yesterday, I had one of those days where I was like, can't believe this shit is still happening, right? And we're all going to have that. Like none of us are immune from it. The question is, how do we develop the right coping mechanisms to keep going and staying, and how to stay in the fight? So, yeah, that's it. That's my best advice, you guys. Okay. I have a bonus broadcast coming up for our Patreon subscribers today. I think it's going to be at 2:30, you guys, 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. Again, I have timing to deal with now that my kids are back in school. So I think that's going to be the time slot this afternoon. Stay tuned for that if you're on the Patreon. And then don't forget, please, to thumbs up here, like this broadcast, subscribe to this channel, get that 20% off over on Patreon for an annual subscription using the code podcast. And I will catch you all back here live next week. I hope you all have a relaxing and restorative weekend. All right, everybody. See you then. Bye.